There's a quiet voice that lives inside almost everyone. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention. Most of the time, it whispers, are you really good enough? What if you fail? What if everyone find out you are pretending? What if you try your hardest and it still isn't enough? That voice is called self doubt. And if you have ever felt it, you are not alone. Self doubt doesn't care how intelligent you are, it doesn't care how talented, experienced, attractive, successful, or prepared you may be. It visits students before exams, artists before performances, athletes before competitions, leaders before decisions, parents before sacrifices, dreamers before beginnings. Sometimes self doubt arrives before something important. Sometimes it appears after failure, and sometimes it exists for so long that people mistake it for truth. But self doubt is not truth, it is fear wearing the mask of logic. And the difficult thing about self doubt is that it sounds reasonable. It doesn't always sound dramatic or emotional. Sometimes it sounds practical. Maybe you shouldn't apply. Maybe this goal is too ambitious. Maybe someone else deserves it more. Maybe you should stay where it's safe. Little by little, it convinces people to shrink themselves, like we all do, not because they lack potential, but because they stop trusting their own ability to grow. And that is the real danger of self doubt. Not that it makes people fail, but that it stops them from trying. There are people walking around every day carrying dreams they buried years ago, but not because the dreams was impossible, but because doubt became louder than desire. Think about how many lives are shaped by hesitations. The book never written, the conversation never started, the business never launched, the apology never spoken, the talent never developed, the opportunity never taken. Self doubt creates invisible prisons. And the hardest part is that the prison door is often unlocked. Many people wait for confidence before they act, but confidence rarely comes first. Confidence is usually the result of action, not the cause of it. A child learning to walk doesn't wait to feel confident. They fall repeatedly, they wobble, they fail publicly, but they continue because they do not yet understand embarrassment. Somewhere along the way, people became afraid of looking foolish, afraid of failing visible, afraid of judgment, and slowly, perfectionism replaces curiosity. People stop asking, what can I learn? And start asking, what if I am not enough? But nobody begins as an expert. Every skilled musician once sounded terrible. Even strong speaker once trembled with nervousness. Every successful person once doubted themselves in silence. Growth has always required discomfort. Yet, self doubt tries to convince people that discomfort means incapability. But is that true? No, right? It says, if this feels difficult, maybe you weren't meant for it. But difficulty is not proof of inadequacy. Difficulty is often proof that you are stretching beyond what is familiar, and unfamiliar territory naturally creates uncertainty. The human mind is designed to protect itself. It prefers certainty, predictability, safety. That's why new challenges can feel threatening even when they are opportunities. The mind confuses the unknown with danger. So, when someone begins something meaningful, self doubt often appears alongside it. Not because they are incapable, but because they care. People rarely doubt things that mean nothing to them. Are you really care about anything that nothing meaningful for you? The student doubts themselves because they care about their future. The artist doubts themselves because their work is personal. The person in love doubts themselves because vulnerability matters. Self doubt often grows in places where something important is at stake. But there's another side of this. Sometimes self doubt is rooted much deeper. Sometimes it begins in childhood. A careless comment, constant criticism, comparison, neglect, failure repeated too many times. Eventually, people internalize the voices around them. You are too sensitive. You are not smart enough. You will never succeed. Why can't you be more like someone else? And over time, those external voices become internal ones. A person may grow older while still carrying beliefs they never consciously choose. That is why healing self doubt is not simply about motivation, it is about awareness. You have to notice the stories you repeat to yourself because thoughts repeated often enough begin to feel factual. If someone tells themselves every day that they are incapable, eventually their mind accepts it as identity rather than temporary emotion. But thoughts are not always accurate. A feelings of inadequacy does not prove inadequacy. Fear is possessive, not prophetic. And one of the most powerful moments in a person's life is when they begin separating who they are from what they fear. There is a difference between I failed and I am a failure. One describes an event, the other becomes an identity. Self doubt thrives when people confuse mistakes with definition, but humans beings are works in progress. No life unfolds perfectly. Even the people who appear confident often battle invisible insecurities. Confidence is not the absence of doubt, it is the decision to continue despite doubt. That disconnections change everything because waiting for fear to disappear may keep someone waiting forever. Courage is not fearlessness. Courage is movement in the presence of fear. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is continue while uncertain, to apply anyway, to speak anyway, to create anyway, to begin anyway. There is a strange irony about self doubt. The people who question themselves deeply are often thoughtful, self aware, and capable of growth. Meanwhile, people who never question themselves at all can become reckless. A healthy amount of self reflection is valuable, but self doubt becomes destructive when reflection turns into paralysis. When someone overthinks every decision, when they seek endless validation, when they constantly compare themselves to others, comparison is one of self doubt's favorite weapons. Remember that, especially now, in a world where people constantly witness curated version of everyone else's life. Someone sees another person succeeding and immediately feels behind. But comparison ignored context. It compares your private struggles to someone else's public highlights reel. It overlooks timing, resources, opportunities, personality, background, and invisible hardship. And most importantly, comparison distracts people from their own path. A tree does not question its worth because another tree grows differently. Growth is not meant to look identical. Some people bloom early, some bloom late, some take unconventional path, some restarts entirely. Life is not a race with one timeline, and yet self-doubt constantly whispers, "You are behind. You missed your chance. You should already have it figured out." But very few people truly have life figured out. Most are improvising, learning, adapting. Even adulthood often feels like uncertainty, disgust, and responsibilities. And perhaps that realization can be freeing. You do not need complete certainty to move forward. You only need willingness. Willingness to learn, willingness to fail, or willingness to grow. Because growth rarely happens inside comfort. Imagine if every person quit at the first sign of insecurity. No inventions, no art, no discovery, no transformations. Every meaningful achievements in human history passed through uncertainty first. Self-doubt says you can't. Experience says you don't know until you try. And trying changes people. Even failure changes people. Failure is painful, yes, but failure also teaches resilience, humility, adaptability, and wisdom. People often fear failure because they think it will destroy them. But many discovers that surviving failure actually makes them stronger. The fear beforehand is often worse than the reality itself. And sometimes the greatest tragedy is not failing. It is living with the regret of never attempting what mattered. Years later, people rarely regret every mistake they made. They regret the chances they abandoned because fear convinced them they were incapable. There is a quote that says, "Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will." And the truth is that because failure at least provides experience, doubt often provides nothing except hesitation. But overcoming self doubt does not happen overnight. It is not one dramatic moment where fear vanished forever. It is a practice, a daily practice of challenging limiting beliefs, a daily practicing of showing up despite uncertainty, a daily practice of speaking to yourself with honesty instead of cruelty. Because many people say things to themselves they would never say to another human beings. Imagine speaking to a friend. There was some people speak to themselves. You will never succeed. You always ruin everything. You are not talented enough. It would sound harsh, unfair, even abusive. Yet, internally, many people normalize this language, and over time, the mind begins believing it. Self comparison is not weakness, it is psychological strength. People grow more effectively through encouragement than humiliation. That does not mean avoiding accountability, it means understanding that being human includes imperfections. No one evolved through self hatred, and healing self doubt often begins with changing the relationship you have with yourself. Not becoming arrogant, not pretending fear doesn't exist, but recognize your worth independent of temporary outcomes. You are more than your worst moment, more than your mistakes, and more than one rejections, more than one option. A single setback cannot measure the full value of a human life. And perhaps one of the most important truth is this: you do not need permission to believe in your own potential. Not everyone will understand your vision, not everyone will support your growth. Some people project their fear onto others because they abandoned their own dreams long ago. But another person's doubt does not define your limits. History is filled with individuals who were underestimated, people who were told they were too late, too different, too weak, too unrealistic, and still they persisted, not because they were fearless, but because they refused to let fear make their decisions. That is the difference. Self doubt may still appear. Even successful people feel it. Even accomplished people question themselves. The goal is not eliminating doubt completely. The goal is reducing its authority over you, your action. To hear the voice and continue anyway, to acknowledge uncertainty and move anyway. To understand that confidence is built through evidence gathered from experience. Every small step matters. Every time you act despite fear, you weaken self doubt's control. Every difficult conversation, every attempt, every moment of persistence, you slowly proves to yourself that fear is survived. And eventually, something changes, not suddenly, not magically, but gradually. You begin trusting yourself more, not because life becomes easier, but because you realize you can handle discomfort. And the realization is powerful because when people trust themselves, they stop needing guarantees before taking action. They understand that uncertainty is part of growth. Life itself is uncertain. No one can predict every outcomes. No one can control everything. So, perhaps the real question is not what if I fail, but what if I succeed? What if I become stronger? What if this challenge transforms me? What if the person I am becoming is waiting on the other side of this fear? Self doubt will likely visit again on difficult mornings, before major decisions, during transitions and setbacks. But when it does, remember this: the presence of doubt does not mean the absence of capability. Fear can exist beside potential, uncertainty can exist beside talent. Vulnerability can exist beside strength, and maybe courage is simply learning to walk forward while of all those things coexist within you. Not because perfectly, not flawlessly, but honestly. The people who grow are not always the most confident. They are often the ones who continue despite uncertainty, the ones who try again, the ones who rise after embarrassments, the ones who choose resistance over perfections. And if you are struggling with self doubt right now, perhaps this moment is not proof that you are weak. Perhaps it is proof that you are standing at the edge of something meaningful, something that matters enough to scares you. So take the step anyway, speak anyway, begins anyway, learn anyway, and dream anyway. Because your future should not be decided entirely by the fear of your present self. And one day you may look back and realize that the voice of self doubt never fully disappeared. You simply stopped obeying it.